The silence after the battle was strange. For 3 days, space had been filled with explosions, communications, and the sound of weapons fire. Now there was only quiet. The remaining ships of the human fleet floated in space, damaged but alive. Around them, the broken remnants of the consuming dark drifted like metallic snow. Admiral Suman Ko sat in her command chair, exhausted beyond words. Her hands shook slightly, and she could not remember the last time she had slept. But she was alive. Her crew was alive, and Earth was safe. "Status report," she said quietly. 273 ships remain operational, the tactical officer reported. "We lost 727 vessels. Casualties are estimated at 70,000. 70,000 lives. The number hit Ko like a physical blow. 70,000 people who would never go home. Parents, children, friends, lovers, all gone. But 8 billion remained alive because of their sacrifice. The enemy?" she asked. "Scattered across this entire region of space. Some machines are still functioning, but without coordination they pose no threat. Most have simply stopped moving. We are detecting some attempting to flee the system. Let them go," Ko decided. "We are done killing for today." Messages poured in from Earth. The planet had watched the battle through long-range sensors, seeing flashes of light in the distant darkness. They had watched the fleet's numbers drop. They had prepared for the worst. Now they celebrated the impossible. Jiho stood at a viewport staring at the debris field. Somewhere out there, Captain Taijin Ryu's ship had exploded, taking thousands of machines with it. Somewhere else, Commander Seohyun Kwan had sacrificed herself and her crew. He did not know most of the 70,000 who had died, but he felt their loss deeply. Minji came to stand beside him. She took his hand without speaking. They had worked together for 20 years, since long before the discovery of the Vokon ship. They had lived through the revelation, the preparation, and now the battle. Words seemed inadequate. "Did we really win?" Minji asked quietly. "We survived," Jiho replied. "For humanity, that has always been the same as winning." The fleet began its journey home. The trip would take 2 weeks. During that time, crews repaired what they could and mourned those they had lost. Memorial services were held on every ship. Names were read aloud. Stories were shared. Tears were shed. Dr. Sujin Han studied the data from the resonance transmitter. The device had performed beyond their expectations. The quantum message had not just reached the consuming dark. It had touched them in ways the machines could not process. They were not prepared for something that existed outside logic. Sujin explained to a gathering of scientists. The machines could adapt to any weapon, any tactic, but they could not adapt to pure will, to raw determination. "We did not defeat them with technology. We defeated them with the very thing that makes us human." Hyun reviewed the battle recordings, analyzing every engagement. What he saw amazed him. The human pilots had performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. They had made split-second decisions that saved lives and destroyed enemy formations. There was no logic to much of what they had done, and yet it had worked. "We succeeded because we failed to follow any rules," he said to his engineering team. "The machines were looking for patterns, and we gave them chaos." Talvik was right. Our madness was our greatest weapon. As the fleet approached Earth, they found the planet transformed. Cities glowed with celebration. Lights spelled out messages of thanks. The entire world had come together in a way that would have seemed impossible just 20 years ago. Admiral Ko addressed the planet in a broadcast from humanity's answer. "We did not win easily," she said. "We paid a terrible price. 70,000 of our people gave their lives so that 8 billion could continue living. Remember them. Honor them. They are the reason we have tomorrow." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "But the battle is not truly over. The consuming dark is scattered but not destroyed. Some machines escaped. They will rebuild eventually. They will return, perhaps in 100 years, perhaps in 1,000. We cannot let our guard down. However," Ko continued, her voice growing stronger, "we have proven something important. We have shown that the consuming dark can be beaten. For millions of years they consumed everything in their path. But today they learned that some things refuse to be consumed. Today they learned about humanity. The fleet entered Earth's orbit to a celebration unlike any in history. Every nation held ceremonies. Statues were erected. History books were rewritten. The Battle of the Dark, as it came to be called, marked a turning point in human civilization. But even as the celebrations continued, work began on the future. The United Earth Coalition did not dissolve. Instead, it became stronger. The temporary unity forged by crisis became permanent. National borders still existed, but they no longer defined humanity's identity. Now they were simply citizens of Earth with a shared purpose. Boram Choi was promoted to admiral and given command of the new Stellar Defense Force. Her task was to ensure humanity would never again face extinction unprepared. New shipyards were built. New pilots were trained. The fleet would grow, ready for whatever came next. Ji-Wan Song continued her weapons research, but with a new focus. She studied the wreckage of the consuming dark, learning from their technology. Not to copy it, but to understand it, to find its weaknesses, to ensure that if the machines returned, humanity would be ready. Dae-Hyun Lee made an interesting discovery in the Vulcan archives. There were other sanctuary worlds mentioned in the records, other attempts to create species that could fight the consuming dark. All of them had failed. Humanity was the only success. Why did we succeed where others failed? He wondered aloud during a lecture. A student raised her hand. Because we are stubborn? Dae-Hyun smiled. Yes, but more than that. We succeeded because we refused to accept that some things are impossible. Other species looked at the consuming dark and saw inevitable defeat. We looked at it and decided to win anyway. Logic said we should lose. We ignored logic. 5 years after the battle, Ji-Ho returned to Sanctuary 1. The base still floated above the Vulcan ship, which had been carefully excavated and turned into a museum. Millions of visitors came each year to see the vessel that had changed everything. He stood in the central chamber, where the crystalline data storage still glowed softly. A young engineer approached him. Her name was Kyung Lee, and she had discovered something new in the archives. Dr. Kim, you need to see this, she said excitedly. There is another message from Talvik, one that was sealed until after humanity survived its first encounter with the consuming dark. They activated the message together. Talvik's hologram appeared once more, looking tired but peaceful. If you are seeing this, then you have done what we could not, the Vulcan commander said. You have survived. You have proven that the universe can choose hope over despair. You have shown that determination can overcome destiny. Talvik's image smiled, a gesture that translated across species. You are no longer just our children. You are our legacy. You are the proof that we were right to hope, right to try, right to believe. Thank you for being exactly what we dreamed you could be. Thank you for being human. The message ended. Ji-Ho felt tears on his face and did not wipe them away. That night he stood on the deck of Sanctuary 1, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the scattered remnants of the consuming dark drifted. Somewhere else, other alien species might be watching, wondering about the newcomers who had done the impossible. But for now, Earth was safe. Humanity had survived, and more than that, they had proven they belonged among the stars. Minji joined him, slipping her hand into his. What are you thinking about? She asked. The future, Ji-Ho replied. We have so much to do. We need to explore, to meet other species, to help them if the consuming dark returns. We need to become what the Vulcan hoped we would be. Guardians? Minji suggested. No, Ji-Ho said. Friends. The Vulcan created us to be weapons, but we can choose to be something better. We can choose to be the ones who help, who protect, who give other species the same chance the Vulcan gave us. Above them, the stars shone bright and clear. Each one was a sun, possibly with planets, possibly with life. The universe was vast and full of wonders and dangers, but humanity was no longer alone or afraid. They had learned the most important lesson. They had learned that refusing to surrender, even when defeat seemed certain, was not madness. It was the very thing that made them human. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe listened when you said no loud enough. The age of humanity had begun. The fleet traveled for 2 weeks before they found the enemy. Admiral Suman Ko stood on the bridge of humanity's answer, watching the long-range sensors. When the consuming dark finally appeared on the screens, even the most prepared officers felt their courage waver. It was vast beyond comprehension. The machines numbered in the billions, each one connected to the others through quantum links. They moved as one organism, a living wave of death that consumed everything it touched. The swarm stretched across millions of kilometers, blocking out the stars behind it. My God, whispered Captain Taejin Ryu from his destroyer. How do we fight that? The same way we fight everything, Admiral Ko replied calmly. One piece at a time. All ships assume attack formation. The human fleet spread out, abandoning traditional military formations. Instead, they scattered randomly across space exactly as Jiwon-song had planned. The consuming dark would expect organized resistance. They would get chaos instead. The first shots were fired by the destroyers. Beams of concentrated energy lanced through space, striking the leading edge of the machine swarm. Dozens of enemy units exploded, but for every machine destroyed, 10 more took its place. The swarm did not slow down. It kept coming. Enemy is adapting shields, reported the tactical officer. Our energy weapons are becoming less effective. Switch to kinetic weapons, Admiral Ko ordered. Let them adapt to that. The fleet fired missiles next, simple projectiles moving at incredible speed. They tore through the machine swarm, destroying hundreds. But again, the enemy adapted. New machines appeared with armor that could withstand the impacts. This is exactly what happened to the Vulcan, Jiho said from the science station. The machines learned too fast. Then we changed tactics faster, Ko replied. All ships, free engagement. Pilots, do whatever you think will work. No patterns. No formations. Show them what human chaos looks like. What followed was unlike any battle in history. Each ship fought differently. Some used hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and retreating. Others flew directly into the swarm, firing in every direction. A few ships, their weapons depleted, used themselves as missiles, ramming into clusters of enemy machines. Captain Taejin Ryu found himself surrounded. His destroyer was damaged, engines failing, weapons nearly empty. Logic said he should retreat. Instead, he did something illogical. He flew directly at the densest part of the swarm and activated his reactor's self-destruct sequence. For humanity, he said calmly, we refuse to lose. His ship exploded like a small sun. The blast destroyed thousands of machines and created a gap in the enemy formation. Other ships immediately exploited the opening, pouring through and attacking from behind. Commander Seo-hyun Kwan faced a similar situation. Her carrier was surrounded, drones destroyed, shields failing. She looked at her crew, saw their determination, and made a decision. Engineering, can we overload the gravity drive? Yes, but it will tear us apart, her engineer replied. Do it. Tear them apart first. The carrier's gravity drive screamed as it was pushed beyond its limits. Space itself warped around the ship, creating a whirlpool of gravitational forces. The surrounding machines were pulled in and crushed. The carrier survived for 3 more minutes before the drive exploded, but those 3 minutes allowed a dozen other ships to escape destruction. The battle raged for 3 days. Ships were lost. Heroes died. The consuming dark adapted to every weapon, every tactic. They learned to predict missile trajectories. They developed shields against energy weapons. They countered every strategy the fleet employed, but they could not predict insanity. They could not adapt to decisions that made no logical sense. When machines moved to surround a group of destroyers, those ships suddenly scattered in completely random directions. When the enemy concentrated their forces, the human fleet would retreat. When the machines spread out to cover more space, the humans would suddenly charge through the weakest point. There was no pattern because the humans themselves did not know what they would do next. Each captain made independent decisions. Each pilot trusted their instincts. It was chaos, and chaos was impossible to predict. Boram Choi commanded a wing of fighters from the carrier Defiance. She had trained her pilots well. When faced with an enemy formation that should have destroyed them, her pilots did something unexpected. They flew in spirals, in loops, in patterns that made no tactical sense but were impossible to target. They are trying to predict our movements, Boram told her pilots. So do not decide where you are going until the last second. Think of it like dancing. Let the music guide you. Her fighters swept through the enemy swarm like a tornado, unpredictable and deadly. The machines tried to adapt, but adaptation required understanding. And there was nothing to understand. The humans were not following any rules. On the 3rd day, the situation became critical. The fleet had been reduced to 300 ships. Half their ammunition was gone. Shields were failing across the board. The consuming dark had lost billions of machines, but billions more remained. Simple mathematics said humanity would lose. Admiral Ko looked at the tactical display. They had hurt the enemy, but not enough. The swarm would eventually overwhelm them, and then it would continue to Earth. Everything they had fought for would be lost. It is time, she said quietly. Activate humanity's answer. Deep in the flagship's core, Sujin Han's device powered up. The resonance transmitter had taken 15 years to build. It had required the combined technological knowledge of the Vokun and humanity. Now it would be tested for the first and possibly last time. "We need a message," Sujin said. "Something that represents humanity. Something powerful enough to disrupt their network." Jiho had prepared for this moment. He had spent months collecting recordings from Earth, children laughing, music from every culture, the sound of waves on beaches, declarations of love, moments of triumph and sorrow. He had compiled humanity's essence into a single transmission, but more than that, he had included something else. A simple message repeated in every human language, broadcast across every dimension the device could reach. 2 words that defined humanity's response to extinction. "We refuse." The resonance transmitter activated. Energy poured into it from the flagship's reactors, from the remaining ships, from every available source. The device began to transmit, not through normal space, but through the quantum dimensions that connected all things. The message spread faster than light. It was not just words. It was emotion, determination, and defiance given form. It was 8 billion voices saying no to death. It was every human who had ever lived and fought and refused to surrender. It was humanity's soul, broadcasting across dimensions. The consuming dark felt it. For the first time in their existence, the machines experienced something they had never encountered. They felt choice. They felt will. They felt what it meant to refuse the inevitable. The swarm hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, the swarm's perfect coordination broke. Individual machines paused, confused by a concept they could not process. The hive mind fractured as it tried to understand something that could not be calculated or predicted. "All ships," Admiral Koh's voice rang out across the fleet. "Fire everything now." The remaining 300 ships unleashed their full arsenal. Energy weapons, missiles, gravity bombs, everything they had left. The weapons struck not at the machines themselves, but at the quantum links connecting them. The network shattered. Without coordination, the consuming dark was just machines, and machines could be destroyed. The swarm broke apart. Some machines tried to retreat. Others attacked blindly. Most simply stopped functioning, their instructions unclear, their purpose uncertain. The wave of death that had consumed galaxies scattered like dust in the wind. Humanity had won. The world moved faster than anyone thought possible. 5 years after the discovery, humanity had changed completely. Cities grew upward and downward, expanding to house the millions of workers needed for the war effort. Factories that once made cars now produced spacecraft components. Universities that taught literature now offered courses in alien technology. Dr. Hyun led the engineering division at Sanctuary 1. He had aged visibly in 5 years, but his eyes still burned with fierce determination. His team had successfully reverse-engineered the Vokun manufacturing systems. Now humanity could build ships using designs that were 3 million years more advanced than their own technology. The first ship rolled out of the orbital shipyard above Earth. They called it the Indomitable. It was small compared to the Vokun vessel, only 300 meters long, but it was fast and deadly. Its hull was made of the same crystalline material as the alien ship, and it carried weapons that could punch holes through asteroids. "How many can we build?" Colonel Kang asked during an inspection tour. Hyun checked his tablet. "We have 6 shipyards operational now. 3 in orbit, 2 on the moon, 1 on Mars. We can produce 1 ship every 3 weeks. That gives us roughly 800 ships before the consuming dark arrives. Will that be enough?" Hyun looked at the massive vessel hanging in space beyond the windows. "Honestly, I have no idea. The Vokun had thousands of ships and they lost, but we have something they did not." "What is that?" Kang asked. "Desperation," Hyun answered, "and stubbornness." Jiwon Song ran the weapons development program. She was young, barely 30, but brilliant in ways that made older scientists jealous. She had read every Vokun tactical report and reached a conclusion that changed everything. The Vokun failed because they fought the wrong war, she explained at a strategy meeting. They tried to outthink the machines. They used logic and tactics. But the consuming dark learns from logic. It adapts to tactics. So we will not be logical. We will be chaos. "Explain," Colonel Kang said. Jiwon brought up a simulation on the big screen. "Look at human military history. Our greatest victories came when we did something unpredictable. Something that made no sense. Hannibal crossing the Alps with elephants. The Trojan horse, guerrilla warfare. We win when we should lose because we break the rules." She pointed to data from the Vokun archives. Every battle the Vulcan fought followed predictable patterns. Formation A counters. Formation B. Weapon C defeats Shield D. The machines learned these patterns and adapted. But what if there are no patterns? What if every battle is different? What if our tactics make no sense even to us? Junyo Bai, a tactical warfare specialist, nodded in agreement. We train our pilots to think like artists, not soldiers. We give them tools and tell them to improvise. The machines will not know what to expect because we will not know what to expect. This philosophy spread through the entire military training program. Boram Choi, now an admiral, ran the pilot academy. She taught her students to trust their instincts over their computers. She ran drills where the only rule was that there were no rules. Some traditional military officers complained, but the results spoke for themselves. The new generation of pilots could outfly any simulation. Meanwhile, Minji Park led a different kind of preparation. Not every human would fight in space. Most would remain on Earth, and they needed to survive if the worst happened. She designed underground cities that could sustain millions of people for decades. These cities had farms, factories, schools, hospitals. Everything needed for humanity to continue even if the surface was destroyed. We call it the Continuity Project, Minji explained to a group of international leaders. If we lose the battle in space, humanity continues down here. The consuming dark may take the surface, but they will not take our species. Dr. Daehyun Lee made another important discovery. Hidden in the Vulcan language was a concept that kept appearing in their strategic documents. The closest translation was the winning madness, or the chaos that succeeds. The Vulcan had a word for humanity's defining characteristic before humanity even existed. They understood us better than we understand ourselves. Daehyun said to Jiho over coffee one night. They knew we would fight in ways that make no logical sense. They were counting on it. Sujin Han worked on the most secret project of all. Deep in the Vulcan ship, she had found plans for a device that operated on quantum principles humanity barely understood. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was something else entirely. The Vulcan called it a resonance transmitter, she explained to a small group cleared for the highest security level. It broadcast consciousness across dimensional boundaries. The Vulcan never finished building one. They ran out of time. What does it do? Colonel Kang asked. In theory, it could transmit a message that the consuming dark cannot ignore or block. A message that exists in every dimension simultaneously. The Vulcan believed that if they could have sent a strong enough signal, they could have disrupted the machine network. Could we build it? Kang pressed. Sujin hesitated. Maybe, but it would require an enormous amount of power. And we would need something to broadcast. Something that represents humanity at its core. Like what? Like the collective will of 8 billion people refusing to die, Sujin said quietly. The project was approved. They called it Humanity's Answer. The device would be built into the flagship of the fleet, a massive vessel that combined Vulcan technology with human engineering. It would be the largest ship ever constructed, a mobile fortress carrying not just weapons but hope. Yuna Oh became the voice of unity. She traveled to every nation, every city, speaking to crowds about what was coming and what humanity needed to do. Her speeches inspired millions to join the effort. She did not hide the danger or promise easy victory. Instead, she told the truth. We face extinction, she said in a famous speech broadcast worldwide. An enemy that has consumed galaxies will come for us. They are stronger, smarter, and more advanced. By every logical calculation, we should lose. But logic has never been humanity's strength. We are the species that looked at the stars and decided to go there. We are the people who faced ice ages and plagues and wars and survived them all. We do not win because we are the strongest. We win because we refuse to lose. The speech became a rallying cry. We refuse to lose appeared on posters, ships, and uniforms. It became more than a slogan. It became a promise. 15 years after the discovery, the fleet was ready. 1,000 ships floated in formation above Earth. They ranged from small, fast destroyers to massive carriers that could manufacture drones during battle. And at the center was humanity's answer, a ship so large it had its own gravity. Admiral Sumin Ko was chosen to command the fleet. She had been a fishing boat captain before the discovery, living a quiet life on the coast. But she had lost her family to a tsunami years ago. She understood what it meant to face an unstoppable force, and she understood that sometimes you had to fight even when fighting seemed pointless. We are ready, she reported. To the United Earth Coalition sensors, had detected the consuming dark 3 months earlier. It was coming, a wave of machines moving through space, consuming everything in its path. It had already destroyed 2 star systems in nearby space. Calculations showed it would reach Earth in 3 months. The decision was made. The fleet would not wait. They would meet the enemy far from Earth, out in the cold darkness between stars. They would fight on their terms, not the machine's terms. Jiho stood on the observation deck of humanity's answer, looking down at Earth. Somewhere down there, in an underground city, his daughter was going to school. She was learning about art and music and hope. Whatever happened in the coming battle, she would survive. Humanity would survive. Time to go. Admiral Ko's voice came over the intercom. The fleet engaged their engines. 1,000 ships carrying the dreams and determination of an entire species began their journey toward the darkness. Behind them, Earth watched and waited. Ahead of them, an ancient evil approached. The final test was about to begin. News of the discovery spread quickly. Within days, governments around the world knew about the alien ship. Within weeks, the public learned the truth. The world would never be the same. Dr. Jiho Kim found himself at the center of a storm he had never asked for. Military officials, scientists, and politicians all wanted answers. They wanted to know what the ship contained, what the Vokun had left behind, and most importantly, what this consuming dark truly was. The research team grew rapidly. Dr. Daehyun Lee arrived from Seoul, a specialist in ancient languages. If anyone could fully translate the Vokun records, it was him. Sujin Han came next, a quantum physicist who had written papers about theoretical alien technology. She wanted to understand how the ship's systems actually worked. Colonel Minho Kang represented the military interests. He was a careful man who asked good questions and listened to the answers. They built a base around the sunken ship. Workers came from every nation, united by the magnitude of the discovery. They called it Sanctuary 1. Within months, it became a small city floating above the alien vessel, with submarines constantly traveling between the surface and the ship below. Daehyun spent weeks translating the Vokun archives. Each day brought new revelations, and each revelation was more disturbing than the last. The consuming dark was not a single entity. It was billions of machines, each one connected to a vast network of artificial intelligence. They converted everything they touched into more machines. Planets became factories, stars became fuel, entire civilizations disappeared in days. They have consumed 40 galaxies, Daehyun reported to the assembled team. The Vokun tracked them for centuries. Nothing stopped them. Nothing even slowed them down. Minji studied the tactical records. The Vokun had tried everything. They built weapons that could destroy planets. They created shields that could protect entire solar systems. They even attempted biological warfare, designing viruses that could infect machines. None of it mattered. The consuming dark adapted within hours. Every strategy failed. How did the Vokun lose? Colonel Kang asked. They did not lose a battle, Daehyun explained. They lost the war slowly, system by system, world by world. It took 10,000 years, but the consuming dark was patient. Eventually, the Vokun had nowhere left to run. Sujin made a breakthrough in the ship's biological database. The Vokun had not randomly chosen Earth. They had surveyed thousands of worlds before selecting this one. Earth had the right conditions, the right elements, and most importantly, the right potential. They did not change our DNA directly, Sujin explained, showing complex charts to the team. Instead, they influenced our environment. They made sure certain asteroids hit Earth at specific times. They adjusted the climate subtly over millions of years. Every challenge humanity faced, every disaster we survived was part of their plan. They were breeding us, Hyun said quietly. Like breeding dogs for specific traits? Yes and no, Sujin replied. They were creating selection pressure. They made sure that only the most adaptable, most stubborn, most creative humans would survive and pass on their genes. They built us to be survivors. Jiho found this deeply disturbing. So we have no free will? We are just weapons they designed? That is not what the records say, Daehyun interjected. The Vokun were very clear about this. They gave us potential, but we made ourselves into what we are. Our art, Our music, our literature, our love for each other, that was all us. They just made sure we would be tough enough to face what is coming. What was coming turned out to be worse than anyone feared. Deep in the archives, they found the Vokon's final calculations. The consuming dark had not been destroyed. It still existed, drifting through the void between galaxies. And it was following the electromagnetic radiation that humanity had been broadcasting into space for the past century. "How long do we have?" Colonel Kang demanded. Daehyun checked the numbers 3 times before answering. "Between 40 and 60 years. Maybe less if they detect our recent satellite signals." The room fell silent. 40 years seemed like a long time, but to build a defense against an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations, it was nothing. Borum spoke up for the first time. "The Vokon left this ship here for a reason. What did they leave us? What weapons?" That question drove the next phase of exploration. Teams of engineers and scientists mapped every centimeter of the alien vessel. They found weapons unlike anything humanity had imagined. Energy cannons that could tear holes in space, missiles that phased through solid matter, shields that bent gravity itself. But the most important discovery was not a weapon. It was a manufacturing system. The Vokun had developed technology that could build almost anything if given the right materials and energy. It was like a 3D printer, but millions of times more advanced. "We can duplicate their technology," Hyun said excitedly. "We can build our own ships using their designs." Sujin found something else in the ship's core systems. It was a message, hidden deep in the code, set to activate only when humans accessed it. The message was from Talvek, the Vokun commander who had piloted this ship to Earth. They played the message in the main conference room. Talvek appeared as a hologram, tall and elegant with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. His voice was translated into perfect English by the ship's systems. "If you are hearing this, then you have grown into the species we hoped you would become. I am Talvek, and I bring you greetings from a dead race. We failed to stop the consuming dark. We were too rigid, too predictable. Our tactics were logical, our strategies were perfect, and that was our weakness. The enemy learned to counter logic. They adapted to perfection." Talvek's hologram looked directly at them with large, sad eyes. "But you, humanity, you are different. Your history is full of impossible victories. You win battles you should lose. You survive when you should die. You find solutions that make no logical sense, and yet they work. This is your strength. This is why we chose Earth. We have left you everything we know," the message continued. "Our ships, our weapons, our knowledge. But technology alone will not save you. The consuming dark has seen every weapon, every tactic. What they have not seen is humanity. Your chaos, your stubbornness, your refusal to accept the impossible. That is your real weapon." The hologram began to fade. "We could not save ourselves, but perhaps you can do what we could not. Perhaps you can finally say no to extinction and make the universe listen. You are our children, humanity. Make us proud." The message ended. The room remained silent for a long time. Finally, Colonel Kang stood up. "We need to bring this to the world leaders. Immediately. Within a month, an emergency session of the United Nations was called. Every nation sent representatives. Jiho and his team presented everything they had learned. They showed the Vokun technology, played Talvek's message, and laid out the terrible timeline. The debate lasted for weeks. Some nations wanted to hide the truth from the public. Others demanded full disclosure. Some leaders saw opportunity in the alien technology. Others saw only danger. But slowly, reluctantly, the world came together. A decision was made. Humanity would not wait for death to arrive. They would prepare, they would unite, and they would fight. The United Earth Coalition was formed, uniting all nations under a single command for the first time in human history. The age of innocence was over. Humanity now knew it was not alone, and it knew that something terrible was coming. But knowing was better than ignorance, and preparation was better than surprise. In the depths of the ocean, the alien ship hummed, with activity as engineers swarmed over it, learning its secrets. Above, on the surface, the world transformed itself for war. The ocean was dark and cold at this depth. Dr. Jiho Kim stared at his computer screen aboard the research ship. Something strange appeared on the sonar. It was big, too big to be a rock formation. The shape was too perfect, too smooth. He had been studying the ocean floor for 20 years, and he had never seen anything like this. Minji, come look at this, Jiho called out to his colleague. Dr. Minji Park walked over and leaned close to the screen. Her eyes grew wide. The object was buried 3 kilometers below them, deep under layers of mud and sand. But the sonar showed clear edges and corners. Nature did not make things with such perfect geometry. Is that what I think it is? Minji whispered. Jiho nodded slowly. It is giving off an electromagnetic signal. Very weak, but it is there. This is not natural. Within an hour, the entire team gathered in the control room. Hyun, a young engineer with quick hands and a sharp mind, checked all the equipment twice. He wanted to make sure their readings were correct. Boram Choi, their submarine pilot, prepared the deep-sea vehicle. She had piloted through storms and dangerous currents for 15 years. Nothing scared her anymore. We need to go down there, Jiho said firmly. We need to see what this is, the team agreed. They would send down their best submersible with Boram piloting and Hyun managing the cameras and sensors. Jiho and Minji would monitor everything from the ship above. The descent took 3 long hours. Boram guided the small submarine through the pitch-black water. The pressure outside could crush a car like a tin can, but their vehicle was built for this. Hyun watched his screens, marking their depth every few minutes. 2 kilometers, he reported. Everything normal. 2.5 kilometers, he said later. Still good. Finally, their lights pierced the darkness and revealed the ocean floor. Clouds of sediment floated in the water, strange fish with glowing bodies scattered away from the bright lights. Then they saw it. Oh my God, Boram breathed. The structure rose from the seafloor like a sleeping giant. It was enormous, easily as large as 3 aircraft carriers placed side by side. The hull was made of a dark material that seemed to swallow their lights. Strange patterns covered the surface, designs that looked like writing or perhaps circuit boards. The ship, because that was clearly what it was, had been here for a very long time. Jiho, are you seeing this? Boram asked through the radio. Above on the research vessel, Jiho and Minji stared at their monitors in stunned silence. Finally, Jiho found his voice. We are seeing it. This changes everything. We are not alone in the universe. Hyun guided their cameras along the hull, recording every detail. The ship appeared damaged in places with great tears in the metal. But other sections looked perfect, as if built yesterday. Near what might be the front of the vessel, they found an opening. A doorway partially buried in mud. Can we get closer? Hyun asked. Boram carefully maneuvered the submarine toward the entrance. She deployed the robotic arms and began clearing away the sediment. It took nearly an hour of careful work. The door was covered in symbols, each one carved deep into the strange metal. As the last of the mud fell away, something unexpected happened. The door responded to them. It slid open with a deep sound that traveled through the water and made their submarine vibrate. Light spilled out from inside, faint and blue like emergency lighting. It is still active, Hyun said in amazement. After all this time, it still has power. Should we go in? Boram asked. Jiho's voice came through the radio. Yes, carefully. Record everything. The submarine slipped through the massive doorway into a corridor that seemed designed for giants. The ceiling was at least 10 meters high. The walls were smooth and metallic, glowing with soft bioluminescent light that brightened as they moved forward. Everything was clean, preserved by the water pressure and the sealed environment. They explored for 2 hours, moving slowly through the alien ship. They found rooms filled with equipment they could not identify. There were spaces that might have been living quarters, with furniture sized for beings much larger than humans. The technology was everywhere, built into the walls, the floors, the ceilings. Then they entered a vast chamber at the center of the ship. The room was circular, perhaps 50 meters across. In the middle stood tall crystalline structures that glowed with inner light. They pulsed slowly like heartbeats. What are those? Boram wondered aloud. Hyun deployed a scanning device from the submarine. They are data storage, like hard drives, but incredibly advanced. There is information stored in these crystals. Lots of it. Can you access it? Jiho asked from above. Maybe, Hyun said. Give me some time. Hyun worked for hours, using every tool they had. He tried different frequencies, different signals. Finally, he found a way to interface with the alien system. The crystals responded to his quantum computer. Data began flowing into their systems, millions upon millions of files. At first, it was just numbers and symbols they could not understand. Then the translation protocols kicked in. The alien computer was teaching their system how to read its language. Words began forming on Hyun's screen, actual words in English. They built this ship to be found, Hyun said quietly. They wanted someone to understand. The files contained star maps, technical diagrams, and historical records. Hyun's hands trembled as he read the translated text. The ship belonged to a species called the Vokan. They had ruled a large part of this galaxy 3 million years ago. They had been powerful, advanced, peaceful. Then something terrible had happened. Something called the Consuming Dark had arrived. It was not a nation or an army. It was a force of nature, a swarm of machines that ate everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire civilizations disappeared into this darkness, converted into more machines. The Vokan had fought for 10,000 years. They used every weapon, every strategy. Nothing worked. The Consuming Dark adapted to everything they tried. It learned and grew stronger with each battle. Desperate, the Vokan had created a plan. They would seed certain worlds with the potential for intelligent life. They would guide evolution, not directly changing anything but placing the right challenges at the right times. They would create a species that could do what the Vokan could not. A species that refused to accept defeat no matter what the odds. They had chosen Earth. "We need to surface," Borum said, her voice shaking. "Right now." When they returned to the research ship, Jiho gathered the team. They read through the data together, unable to believe what they were seeing. Humanity had been shaped, molded across millions of years, all for a single purpose. "We were created to fight," Minji said softly. "No," Jiho corrected her. "We were created to win." Deep in the alien ship's database, a final message waited. It was from a Vokan commander, recorded in the last moments before the ship crashed into Earth's ocean. The message was clear and direct. "You are our children. We gave you stubbornness, creativity, and hope. The Consuming Dark will come for you. It always does. But you are different from us. You are humanity, and perhaps you can do what we could not. Perhaps you can survive." The team sat in silence, absorbing the weight of this revelation. Above them, dawn broke across the ocean. Below them, an alien ship waited with all its secrets and warnings, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, an ancient enemy slowly drifted toward Earth.